I was 19 years old at the time, a sophomore in college, living off campus in a quiet town in Pennsylvania. Nothing about my life felt unusual back then. I went to class, worked part-time, and spent most weekends hanging out with friends. One of them was someone I trusted completely. I had known him since high school, and he felt more like family than a friend. The night everything changed started like any other. It was a normal weekday evening. No parties. No plans. Just the usual routine. I remember making instant noodles in the kitchen while my friend sat on the couch, scrolling on his phone. The TV was on but muted. Outside, the street was calm. A few cars passed. Nothing felt off. I went to my room around 10 p.m. because I had an early class the next morning. Before closing the door, I checked the front lock out of habit. It was locked. I clearly remember turning the knob and feeling the resistance. I even joked to my friend about how paranoid I was becoming lately. He laughed and told me to relax. I lay in bed, scrolling through my phone, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator through the wall. The apartment felt safe.
Familiar.
Boring in the best way. Eventually, I put my phone down and turned off the light. That's when I heard it. At first, it was so subtle, I thought I imagined it. A soft sound, like fabric brushing against fabric. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, listening. The sound came again.
Slow.
Careful. I assumed it was my friend moving around the living room. Maybe he was going to the bathroom or grabbing water. I didn't think much of it. We shared the place. Noise was normal. But then I realized something that made my stomach tighten. The sound wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside my room. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. My bedroom door was closed. I was sure of that. I always closed it before sleeping. The hinges never made noise, but I would have noticed if it opened. I slowly turned my head toward the door. It looked the same as always. Closed. Quiet. Then I heard breathing. Not loud. Not heavy. Just slow, steady breathing that wasn't mine. I told myself it was my imagination. Stress. Lack of sleep. Anything but what my body already seemed to understand. I wanted to believe I was alone in that room. I wanted to believe the person I trusted most in that apartment would never put me in danger. As I lay there, frozen, another thought hit me. Earlier that evening, my friend had asked a strange question. He wanted to know if I locked my door when I slept. At the time, I laughed and said no. At that point in my life, the apartment felt like a fresh start. It was a small two-bedroom place just outside town, close enough to campus that I could walk to class. The building was old but quiet, the kind where nothing ever seemed to happen. Most of the neighbors were older couples or people who kept to themselves. There were no loud parties, no constant noise. That was part of why I liked it. I lived there with my friend Mark. That night was no different. We talked for a few minutes about classes and rent, nothing serious. He mentioned he might go out later to meet someone, but didn't give details. I didn't think much of it. We didn't check in on each other like that. Around 10 p.m., I went to my room. My bedroom was small. A bed, a desk, a dresser, and a closet that barely closed all the way. The door didn't have a lock, which never bothered me before. I'd lived with roommates for years. Privacy was based on trust. Before lying down, I noticed my phone was almost dead. I plugged it in near the bed and set my alarm. I had an early class and a morning shift the next day. Sleep mattered. From my room, I could hear the TV faintly through the wall. Mark was still awake. The familiar sounds made me feel comfortable. Safe. This was my normal life. Nothing exciting. Nothing dangerous. That's why I ignored the small things. The fact that Mark usually told me when he left, but didn't say anything this time. The way the front door didn't make its usual click earlier. The quiet pauses in the apartment that felt longer than they should have. At the time, none of it seemed important. It was just another night in a shared apartment with a friend I trusted. I didn't fall asleep right away. I was lying on my back, staring at the ceiling, letting my thoughts drift. The apartment had settled into its usual nighttime silence. The TV in the living room was off now. Mark must have gone to bed or stepped out. Either way, I didn't think much about it. A few minutes later, I heard a soft sound near the front of the apartment. It was faint, Just a light click, followed by a pause. At first, I assumed it was the building making noise. Old places always did that. Pipes, doors, air vents. I rolled onto my side and closed my eyes. Then I heard it again. This time, it sounded closer, like someone touching a door handle and letting go. I opened my eyes and listened. There were no voices.
No footsteps.
Just silence that felt thicker than before. I checked my phone. 11:47 p.m. My screen lit up the room for a second, then went dark again. I heard slow footsteps in the hallway. They weren't heavy or rushed. Each step sounded careful, like whoever it was didn't want to be heard. I told myself it was Mark moving around. He sometimes paced when he couldn't sleep. Still, something felt wrong. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I could tell by the way the floor creaked in the same spot. That board always made noise. I waited for the door to open or for the steps to move away. Neither happened. Instead, I heard breathing. Not loud enough to be obvious, but close enough that I noticed the rhythm.
Slow in.
Slow out. I held my own breath without realizing it, trying to figure out if I was imagining things. After a few seconds, the sound stopped. The footsteps moved away down the hall. I let out the breath I'd been holding and told myself I was overreacting. Stress did that to people. Late nights. Too much caffeine. I closed my eyes again. A moment later, the hallway light turned on. The glow slipped under my door, thin and pale. Mark never turned that light on at night. He hated how bright it was. I thought about calling out his name, but decided against it. I didn't want to sound foolish. Then something brushed against my door. It wasn't a knock, more like fingertips dragging lightly across the wood. The sound was soft, almost gentle, but it made my stomach drop. I sat up in bed, my heart starting to beat faster. I watched the door, waiting for it to move. It didn't. The light stayed on. The hallway stayed silent. After a while, the light clicked off. The apartment went dark again.
No footsteps.
No sound. Just quiet. I lay back down, but I didn't relax. The normal comfort of the apartment was gone. Every small noise felt sharp. I kept thinking about how careful the movement sounded. How deliberate. That's when the thought crossed my mind. What if Mark wasn't the only one in the apartment? After that thought settled in, I couldn't ignore the fear anymore. I sat upright in bed, listening closely. The apartment felt different now. Smaller. Like the walls were closing in. I tried to hear any sign of movement beyond my door. At first, there was nothing. Then I heard a soft shuffle in the hallway again. Slower this time. Closer. Each sound felt deliberate, like whoever was out there knew exactly where I was. I reached for my phone and unlocked it without turning on the brightness. 11:58 p.m. No messages. No missed calls. I almost texted Mark to ask if he was still awake, but something stopped me. If it wasn't him out there, I didn't want my phone lighting up or making a sound. The doorknob moved slightly. It didn't turn all the way. Just enough to make a faint metal click. My heart started pounding so hard I was afraid it could be heard from the hallway. I held my breath and stared at the door. Another pause. Then the knob moved again, slower this time. Whoever was touching it was being careful.
Testing it.
I realized then that my bedroom door didn't have a lock. The only thing keeping it closed was the handle itself. I slid out of bed and stepped back, my feet cold against the floor. I looked around my room, trying to decide where to go. The closet was too small. The window was painted shut. There was nowhere to hide. The handle stopped moving. I waited, hoping the person would leave. Seconds passed. Then minutes. My legs started to shake from standing still. Suddenly, the door opened a few inches. Just enough for the hallway light to cut into my room. I could see a shadow on the floor.
Tall. Still.
I whispered Mark's name, my voice barely working. No answer came back. The door opened wider. The person on the other side didn't rush in. They stayed there, letting the door move slowly, like they were trying to control every sound. I stepped back until my shoulders hit the wall. My pulse was racing. I felt trapped. If they came in, there was nothing I could do. Then I saw the shoes. They looked familiar. The same sneakers Mark wore almost every day. That should have made me feel safer. It didn't, because I noticed something else. Mark always dragged his left foot slightly when he walked. The person standing outside my room wasn't moving like that at all. The shadow leaned forward. The breathing returned.
Closer now.
Louder, right on the other side of the door. That's when I understood the danger was no longer somewhere in the apartment. It was right in front of me. The door opened another inch. That was enough to break whatever control I had left. I stepped forward without thinking and slammed my shoulder into the door. It hit something solid on the other side. A grunt followed, low and surprised. The door bounced back toward me, but I kept pushing, using my weight, my legs shaking as I forced it closed. I heard movement in the hallway. Not rushing, not panicked. Slow footsteps backing away. "Mark," I said louder this time. My voice cracked. There was no answer. I locked myself in the room the only way I could. I dragged my desk in front of the door, then the dresser on top of it. The furniture scraped loudly against the floor, but I didn't care anymore. My hands were slipping with sweat. Something hit the door from the other side.
Once. Hard.
The wood rattled. Dust fell from the frame. I backed away until I hit my bed and climbed onto it, pulling my knees to my chest. I finally turned my phone screen on and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. Before the call connected, I heard a voice.
Low. Calm.
"Open the door." It was Mark's voice, but it sounded wrong. Flat, like he was forcing it to stay steady. I didn't answer. The door shook again.
Harder this time.
The desk slid slightly. I could hear my own breathing, loud and fast in my ears. The operator picked up, and I whispered my address as quietly as I could, telling her someone was trying to get into my room. Then everything went quiet. No voice.
No footsteps.
No sound at all. I stayed frozen listening, afraid that if I moved, it would start again. Seconds felt like minutes. My muscles burned from staying tense. Suddenly, the front door of the apartment opened and slammed shut. I heard fast footsteps moving away, not careful anymore. Running. I didn't move until the police arrived. They knocked and announced themselves. When I finally pulled the furniture away and opened the door, my legs almost gave out. The officers searched the apartment. Mark wasn't there. They told me the front door had been unlocked. There were fresh marks on my bedroom door where someone had forced it. I packed a bag that night and left with one of the officers driving behind me. I didn't go back to that apartment again. As I sat in the back seat, watching the building disappear, one thought kept repeating in my head. If I hadn't pushed the door when I did, I don't think I would have made it out. The truth didn't come out that night. It came slowly in pieces over the next 2 days. The police first told me Mark hadn't been home when they arrived. His car was gone. His phone went straight to voicemail. At that point, they treated it like a domestic dispute or a misunderstanding. They asked if we had argued. I told them no. We never fought. That seemed to confuse them more. The next morning, I went back to the apartment with an officer to collect the rest of my things. Daylight made the place look harmless again.
Clean.
Quiet. Normal. But the damage was still there. The scrape marks on the floor. The deep scratches around my bedroom door handle. Seeing them made my chest tighten. That's when the officer asked me something strange. He wanted to know if Mark had any friends who stayed over a lot. I said no. Mark was private. He didn't bring people home. The officer nodded and told me they had found something in Mark's room. Behind his dresser, they discovered a spare set of keys. Not just one. 3 copies. All labeled with tape. My room. The front door. The back door. I told them my bedroom door didn't have a lock. That's when the officer said something that changed everything. He didn't need one. They checked the lease records next. Mark's name wasn't supposed to be on it yet. His paperwork had been delayed. Officially, he wasn't a registered tenant. That meant he had been copying keys and entering rooms without permission for weeks before I ever moved in. Then came the part that made my stomach drop. A neighbor from downstairs had reported hearing noises late at night for months. Slow footsteps. Doors opening and closing. Someone standing in the hallway for long periods of time. The neighbor thought it was just roommates keeping odd hours. Security footage from a nearby convenience store showed Mark buying duct tape, gloves, and trash bags 2 nights before the incident. He was alone. When the police finally located him, it wasn't at a friend's house. It was at a motel an hour away. Inside his car, they found my spare phone charger and a notebook. The notebook was filled with dates and times. My work shifts, my class schedule, the hours I slept. The last page had a single sentence written neatly at the bottom. Room access confirmed. Mark told police he just wanted to see if he could. He claimed he never planned to hurt me. He said he was curious, testing boundaries. That explanation didn't match the damage on my door, or the way his voice sounded that night. The investigation didn't go to trial. There wasn't enough to hold him long-term.
No weapon.
No physical assault. Just intent and preparation. Before they released him, one officer said something quietly to me. "If you hadn't been awake," he said, "this would have ended very differently." That was the moment I stopped thinking of Mark as my friend. That was the moment I realized the danger had never come from a stranger. It had been living with me the whole time. I moved out of state 2 weeks later. New city.
New job.
New apartment. I didn't tell many people where I was going. I wanted distance not just from the place, but from the version of my life where I trusted so easily. For a while, things felt normal again. I slept with my bedroom door locked now. Every night, even when I was exhausted, even when it felt unnecessary. I checked windows before bed. I memorized every sound my new apartment made, so I could tell when something was different. The police told me Mark left town after his release. No forwarding address. No active phone number. They said it was unlikely I'd ever see him again. Statistically, people like him disappeared into new routines, new places. I tried to believe that. A month after I moved, I received an email from an unknown address. No subject line. The message was empty. I deleted it and told myself it meant nothing. A few days later, my building manager asked me a question while fixing a light in the hallway. He wanted to know if I had lost a spare key. Someone had tried to access the maintenance closet using one that didn't belong to staff. I told him no. My voice sounded calm, even though my chest tightened. That night, I checked my door twice before going to bed.
Locked. Secure.
I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar hum of the building. Cars outside. Someone coughing in another unit. Normal sounds. Just before I fell asleep, my phone buzzed. It was another email. Same address. Still no subject. This time, there was one line of text. Different door. Same habits. I didn't reply. I didn't call the police either. I didn't know what I would even say. There was no name. No threat. Just a reminder. The email stopped after that. Weeks passed. Then months. But sometimes late at night, I wake up with the same feeling I had back then. The sense that someone is standing just outside my door. Not rushing. Not forcing their way in. Waiting. I've never heard my doorknob move here. I've never seen a shadow under the door. Still, every so often I notice small things. A light in the hallway already on when I swear it was off earlier. Footsteps that stop when I stop listening. The feeling that someone knows my schedule again. I tell myself it's fear. Memory.
Trauma.
But I also know this. The scariest part of what happened wasn't the night itself. It was learning how easily someone you trust can watch you, study you, and stay close without you ever noticing. And even now, when my apartment is quiet and the door is locked, I sometimes wonder, is he gone? Or did he just learn to be quieter? I wish I could say the fear faded with time, that it slowly lost its grip and became just another bad memory. But fear doesn't work that way when it comes from someone who once lived a few feet away from you. I stayed in that new apartment for almost a year. I learned every sound it made. The elevator cable hum. The pipes knocking at dawn. The neighbor upstairs who walked heavy after midnight. I told myself that knowing these sounds meant I was safe. That anything unfamiliar would stand out. Still, I slept lightly. Every night, I placed my phone face down beside me. Volume on, brightness low. I kept a chair pushed under the door handle, even though the door had a lock. It wasn't logical. It just made me feel better. I never told new friends the full story. I kept it vague. Bad roommate. College stuff. People nodded and moved on. They didn't need to know how trust could rot so quietly. About 6 months after the email stopped, something small happened. So small, I almost ignored it. I came home from work one evening and noticed my bathroom mirror had been wiped clean. Not fully cleaned. Just one wide streak, like someone had dragged their hand across it. I stood there for a long time, trying to remember if I had done it myself. I hadn't. The next week, my Wi-Fi name changed. Just one letter added at the end. I called the provider. They said someone had accessed the router manually. I reset everything and changed the passwords. Again, no proof. No clear threat. I started keeping a notebook by my bed.
Dates. Times. Sounds.
Anything that felt off. Writing it down made me feel like I had control. Like if something happened again, I wouldn't question my own memory. One night, while flipping through that notebook, I realized something that made my hands go cold. The feeling I had now was exactly the same as before. Not panic. Not terror. Familiarity. The sense that someone knew my habits. That they understood when I slept deepest. When I was most distracted. When I felt safe enough to stop paying attention. That's what scared me the most. I checked public records once. Mark's name didn't come up anywhere near my city.
No eres.
No charges. No address. It was like he had learned how to disappear cleanly. Sometimes I think about that notebook the police found. The one filled with my schedule. My life reduced to patterns and timings. I wonder how many other notebooks exist now.
Different handwriting.
Different names. Same purpose. Last week, I came home late and found my apartment door unlocked. Nothing was missing. Nothing was moved. I stood in the doorway for a full minute before stepping inside, listening for breathing that wasn't mine. I locked the door and sat on the floor until my heart slowed down. I told myself it was a mistake, that I was tired, that fear was shaping my thoughts. But that night, as I lay in bed, I remembered something Mark once said, months before everything happened. It had seemed harmless at the time. He said, "People think danger is loud. It's not. It's patient." I don't know where he is now. I don't know if those emails were really from him. I don't know if the unlocked door meant anything at all. What I do know is this. I don't trust silence anymore. And I don't trust the comfort of familiarity. Because sometimes the real monster doesn't break in. Sometimes he just waits close enough for you to stop looking.